And welcome into Facebook Live for PressBox Live. I'm Stan the Fan Charles, along with my co-host Gary Stein. Want to remind you that PressBox Live is brought to you by C3 American Exteriors. Your roof damage, PressBox Live is brought to you by C3 American Exteriors. Go to their website at c3america.com to get your roof damage repaired for just the cost of your deductible, or go to c3america.com now to get a free roof inspection. Welcome in. It's a playoff week. The Ravens are heading to Buffalo, New York. And Gary, who better to talk to about it than PressBox's own Coach Smolka, who covers the Ravens, and former editor and Ravens writer for BaltimoreRavens.com, Sarah Ellison. Sarah, how are you? And Bo, how are you?
Good. Thank you very much.
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Stan.
All right. Well, how excited are both of you that the Ravens have made the playoffs and look like maybe they're on a 2000-ish, Bo, I know you were around back then, a 2000-ish type of run toward the Super Bowl?
Well, it's funny. I wasn't covering the team back then. I had actually just moved to Baltimore about a year earlier in 2000. I was joking that if you remember the last Super Bowl run, they did not play well the last month of that season, but they kind of got hot at just the right time. The Ray Lewis last ride and all of that. To me, when I watch this team the past 4 or 5 weeks, and I said this last week, I think to Glenn Clark, it struck me that this team was just in a better place mentally than last year's team was. Last year's team had won 12 in a row. A lot of starters took week 17 off. They had the bye week. And to be blunt, some of them were looking ahead to Kansas City coming here a week later. And they were not fully mentally engaged in that game with Tennessee last year. Compare that to this year. They've got to win 5 games in a row to even get into the playoffs. And I think that sense of urgency really helped them.
Sarah, I was looking at some of your tweets, and your Twitter address is SG Ellison, at SG Ellison. And you were talking about Greg Roman, some coach he had, about telling his offense that we're not better than we were last year, but we're better equipped because of the adversity. As Bo just said, that seems to be kind of maybe the team's mentality right now.
I think that's 100% correct. I think Bo nailed it on that because, he said, last year was fun. He's like, it's fun to be in that locker room after he used the word boat race a team. But then he was like, but the reality is that's not always going to happen. He's like, you're not always going to have the lead. You're not going to be up by 2 scores. You're gonna face adversity. And so he told his team, look at all these records we've set. And it's not because we're better. It's not because we're more talented, but we're more mature. We've been through it. We've been kicked in the gut, and then we got back up and kept going. And I'll just add, I think that's true for the offense as a whole, the team as a whole. But I think it's very true for Lamar Jackson. I think the person who I'm most happy for is the Lamar, because every time the Ravens lost a playoff game, he got all the blame. And then he wins one, and some people are like, well, it's because of the defense. And so there's always going to be those naysayers, but what great from him. He's able to articulate, here's what I did wrong the first 2 games. It was that when we got behind, I tried to do too much with one play. I would try to win it all with one play. So when he gave his speech to the team that Saturday night over Zoom, he gave his speech to the team and he said, take it one play at a time. And if we do that and trust each other, we're going to win. And that's what they did.
Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, Sarah, I want to pick it up, kind of just talking about what you guys just talked about. But, you out of all of us are probably the one who could speak to this the best, because you spent 13 years from 05 to 18, basically, inside that facility, working with these players and this team and this organization on a daily basis. I never really bought into this theory, Sarah, but the more I watch them, the more I do. This team seems to play better with a chip on their shoulder. They need a chip on their shoulder. They kind of like have the persona of our city. Our city, I think, has a little chip on its shoulder. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, on a day-to-day basis, do you agree with that? Do you think that a chip on their shoulder is almost necessary for this team to succeed?
I don't know if it's necessary, and I'll get to that in a second, but I do think it's a very powerful motivator. You look at this alone, John Harbaugh with that win over the Titans, John Harbaugh set the NFL record for the most road playoff games, 8. There was a 3-way tie with Landry and Coughlin, and he just beat all of them. And then you look at their home playoff record, I think it's 3-4. Okay. And so that's very interesting. There is something to this idea that I'm the underdog. Nobody expects me to win. So I don't have anything to lose, I don't have anything to lose, but I will say this, because I've said this to some fans on Twitter. You better get used to being the top dog when you have an MVP caliber quarterback. And so I almost think it's harder to win if you're that Tom Brady and everybody's coming for you. And if Lamar is going to be great throughout his career, which I think he can, the Ravens are going to have to learn how to win when they're the favorites. But I do agree that is the mentality of the city. It's the persona, and I think it's a very powerful motivator.
Let me just jump in real quick before Gary gets another question, because you had a tweet today about Jimmy Smith being asked that question about why they're a better road team. And he said it's sort of like going into the lion's den.
Yeah, he did. He said it. He's like, we just have that road warrior mentality. And when he said the lion's den, it did remind me of the old Brian Billick quote where he's like, when you're going into a lion's den, you don't tiptoe in, you knock that door down, and you go in there screaming like a banshee, to get their attention and to intimidate them and scare them off. And so that is exactly the quote I thought of when Jimmy Smith said that today.
And that's funny you say that, Sarah, because that was the quote that Brian Billick said to his team before the Tennessee game back in 2001. And then they just beat Tennessee last week. Hey, Bo, I've got one for you. It's interesting. Normally, wild card weekend, whoever is the victor, then goes on to play a team that rested last week, in a normal situation. But this year with COVID, there being 7 playoff teams, only one team got the bye. In other words, Buffalo didn't get the bye. So the Ravens are going in against the team that just won as opposed to had a week off. Do you think that is a factor at all in the preparation for either one of these two teams coming into this game?
Well, to be honest, if I were the Ravens, I would have rather gotten the Bills off a bye. I think a team like the Bills that hasn't won a playoff game in forever, I actually predicted the Colts were going to go in and beat Buffalo. And they could have, but Buffalo made all the plays they had to make. But, you take a team like Buffalo and they're playing really well. And, I sometimes wonder if they had a bye, if it would have not served them well. Like I thought the bye didn't serve the Ravens well last year. This league tends to work. These players tend to work in a rhythm. They're in this weekly rhythm. And I know the Ravens, for one team, when they come off the bye week during the season, they have done very well. But I think at this time of year, the guys want to keep playing. I think it served the Bills well to play last week. They were able to squeak it out. I think that gives them more momentum with the Ravens coming in now and a sense of their own they've got their playoff legs under them, so to speak. So I don't know how they're tackling that in the locker room. Obviously the Ravens, and to Sarah's point, there's got to be a sense of relief in that Ravens locker room as much as anything to come away with a win finally. Let's face it, if they had lost that game, another year of listening to this. And as John Harbaugh said after the game ended, we don't have to listen to that anymore. That's done. And so that at the very least, they have to be pleased with that. They should be pleased with a lot of things. And the other thing, to get to Sarah's point, they should be very pleased at it. And it did. They did figure out a different kind of way to win. Lamar Jackson, as a starter, had never won a game when trailing by 10 points. And here he is with all his playoff history. And in the first quarter, what happens? He kind of airmails the throw to Boykin that sails too far inside. It's an easy interception, and bam, they're down 10-0. And you think, oh no, not again, right? And a lot of people are thinking, not again, here we go again. But you talk to the players after the game, and we only get to do it by Zoom, so you don't get to talk to a lot. The sense on that sideline was, we're good. We're good. It's calm. We're good. And it reminded me, honestly, and of a lot of the way players used to talk about Joe Flacco when they fell behind. He was not a guy that got fazed by falling behind. And he was not a guy that got bothered by playing on the road, obviously, because a lot of these John Harbaugh playoff wins involved Flacco on the road. So it sounded like on that sideline, there was a sense of calm, not a big problem, 10-0, we're good, we're good. And I thought one of the biggest plays of the game came when they're down 10-0, and that third down play that ended the first quarter, right? Lamar Jackson's in trouble, avoids the rush, gets near the sideline, and makes a throw to Mark Andrews. It is a tough catch, but he makes the catch, and now they have the ball. They have a first down to start the second quarter. If that play isn't made, they're punting away. They're down 10-0, and all those problems are mounting. So that's a long-winded answer for you, Stan, but there's a lot of benefit to both teams having played last week. I think a bye would not have served either of them well.
Sarah, Dan Orlovsky of ESPN, former quarterback with the Lions, not a great winning quarterback, but he alluded to the play that Bo just talked about, the third down play, which then ultimately set up the 3rd and 7, where Lamar made his 48-yard run. He says without those two plays, the Ravens do not win that football game. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Dan. There's a lot of other plays that are going under the radar, but those are two huge ones. And this is what I would say about both of them. First, the throw to Mark Andrews. Time and time again, it felt like the Titans were trying to jam the middle of the field. So whether it was on the running, the rushing attack, they would use 8 in the box. And then otherwise, they know that Lamar likes to throw across the middle to Mark Andrews or Willie Snead or whoever. And so time and time again, they dared him to pass out to the perimeter. And everybody said Lamar can't throw outside the numbers. Time and time he did over and over again. Now on this specific one, he's running to buy time, but he threw that ball on the run on a rope and got it right to him. So that's number one. Number two, another thing that people will criticize Lamar on is, well, he's just athletic. That doesn't, and then they imply that he doesn't have the IQ. Okay. Right. Well, great. Well, he has a phenomenal football mind and grasp of a very difficult position. You have to have an IQ, okay, to succeed at an MVP level as a quarterback, number one. But Greg Roman today praised Lamar Jackson on that 48-yard run, and not only for his athleticism, he said that the Titans had success with what they're calling a cover 7. And so Lamar had seen that on the film. And so they said, you know what, maybe you just take off and run because they keep having success with the cover 7 when we're trying to run our dig routes. So Lamar recognized it, did 1-2 reads, and boom, he was off. So it wasn't just because of athleticism that he got that 48-yard touchdown. It was because he had been studying the film and he could make those reads.
And he recognized the angle he needed to accelerate. I mean, that's where the athleticism comes in.
But it's interesting, Stan, to get to that play itself. And I've seen this maybe for a lot of people are saying there's like the pre-COVID Lamar Jackson and the post-COVID Lamar Jackson, and whether it was getting away from the game and whether he came back refreshed, all that. To me, when I watched that run, I think early in the year, he would have tried to force a throw on that play. And in the last month of the season, he just seemed to play more freely, and he was more willing to scramble and run and tuck it and run. And I've said this a lot of times, he's at his most dangerous when he's spontaneous. And in a situation like that, and Sarah's right that he recognized this and he knew it would be there if he wanted, he knew what was going to be there. She's right too. He's an astute student of the game. There's a lot of talk about how smart he is when he looks at those, diagnoses those things. But I think the way he attacked defenses, to me, has changed since, say, week 4. And now I thought early in the year he was forcing some throws and looked like he didn't want to run for whatever reason. And then the last month or so, he's been much more comfortable saying, you know what, forget it. I'm just taking off here. You're not always going to get a 48-yard run out of it, but it seems to me that has been a change in the past 5 or 6 weeks.
Buffalo's got a solid defense. I don't think they're spectacular, but they're very solid. What are they going to see in the film of the 3 Titan games where they have been able to kind of either confuse or stymie Lamar on all but that one incredible, actually 2 runs that he made on Sunday. They do seem to bottle him up quite a bit. Sarah, I'll go to you first.
Yeah. Well, if I'm the Bills, I'm actually a little bit more nervous because, again, like I said, they were daring him to throw outside the numbers, and most people say he can't do that. So it's like, uh-oh, now there's another element here. But if you want to bottle up Lamar, that's fine. There's still other weapons on this team, and so here's what gives me hope. I mean, this Titans defense, or Titans, I'm still back in last week. This Bills defense is good, but they're not built to stop the run. And the Ravens run game has changed dramatically from last year when they had a more bully type rushing attack, because you had Yanda, you had Stanley, you still had Nick Boyle. And so Greg Roman said it. He said, necessity is the mother of invention. And so he's, with his run game, spread it out, and he's really forcing defenses to both be stretched horizontally and vertically. And so I believe the Bills have is it like the 26th rush defense, or maybe it's middle of the road. Do you know about
their overall defense is middle of the road, but they're giving up they're giving up the number of yards they give up per carry is like the 6th highest in the league. So
yeah.
It's not as last year when the Ravens went to Buffalo, they had the number 3 overall defense. This year, they've taken a step back from that, and their rush defense, as Sarah said, I mean, when they lost to Arizona and when they lost to Kansas City, they gave up more than 200 yards rushing in both those games this year. So they've given up some yards. I agree with Sarah. I think this is a totally different looking run offense than it was last year. I think one of the best things that Greg Roman has done in the last month or so has go to more and more of these 2 back looks with both Edwards and Dobbins on the field together.
The pony package.
J.K. Dobbins, when he comes across from the slot and takes what amounts to a jet sweep, he could just get to the edge quicker than the guys that are supposed to be covering him or staying with him. And or you take a snap and you got Gus Edwards as essentially a lead blocker in addition to Orlando Brown and Bozeman or whoever else out front. They are really stretching things horizontally more than the Bills ever would have seen last year. And the other thing that to Sarah's point, is that they've seen that, you know what, they can, if you're gonna jam, you want to jam like that, fine. But you know what, we might just find Pat Ricard 3 times for 12 yards a pop, right? Have fun tackling that guy when he gets squared up upfield. Or Marquise Brown got involved. He has 100 yards in both the playoff games. And they need Marquise Brown to be reliable and consistent, which obviously he hasn't always been. But if the Bills think they can, jam between the tackles, cover the middle of the field, it's not going to work, because the Ravens have shown exactly what Sarah's talking about, that they can go horizontally with their run game and they can swing guys out in the flats in their pass game, unpredictable guys like you wouldn't expect Ricard to do.
Yeah, Bo, I think that's a great point. I think the Ravens attacking the flats in the second half last week against Tennessee was huge. But also, just to glom onto that point, look, Dobbins is an upgrade over Ingram from last year. Okay, Dobbins is he can take it to the house anytime. You couldn't necessarily say that about Mark Ingram last year. That's number one. Number two, the biggest difference to me in the Ravens backfield is the agility and the work that Gus Edwards did in the offseason. Last year's Gus Edwards was a plotter. He was a fall forward, a 3-4-5. I mean, don't get me wrong, he had a great year, but it was a 3-4-5 yard guy, hit a guy, make that first down, get it across the line of scrimmage, etc. This year, he's more involved in the passing game, not a lot, but some, but he takes it to the outside. The work that he did in the offseason to make his hips a little looser, to make himself more agile in general, has made him even a bigger threat than he was last year. He's now a dual threat. Not only can he get it across the line and get that first down, but he could make huge plays down the field. That's number one. But I want to switch the conversation real quick to both of you. I'll talk a little bit about that Ravens defense for a second. The one play that showed me as much similarity to the old Ravens defense that this Ravens defense was last week, Bo, was the Deshaun Elliott dislodging the ball from Jonnu Smith with about 10 minutes to go at the Ravens 40-yard line on 3rd and 2. It was a 7-point game. The Titans had the ball. They were driving. I know the crowd wasn't into it because there really wasn't that much crowd, but you can sense the momentum changing. And had Smith been able to hold on to that ball, he would have gotten that first down. The clock would have kept running. Tennessee would have been deep in Ravens territory. And Deshaun Elliott did a Deshaun Elliott thing. And he dislodged that ball and totally disrupted that drive and really any momentum from Tennessee. Your thoughts on that play?
Well, you're exactly right. And Deshaun Elliott, remember, Deshaun Elliott became a starter because of the whole crazy Earl Thomas divorce in August. But he is, and I've said before, I think he's pound for pound one of the hardest hitters in the league. In the Tennessee game here, there was a play where he hammered Derrick Henry. And Henry actually, I think, left the game for a play or two, and that was off of a hit by Elliott. He can be a heat-seeking missile when he gets in there. And I thought the Titans completely botched that possession, because if you look at that situation, on first down there, Derrick Henry gained 8 yards. That was his longest run of the game. And
Right.
the Ravens had done an exceptional job against him. But the game here and in the game in the playoffs last year, they also did a really good job against him early, middle, third quarter. And then Derrick Henry just gets stronger as the game goes on. Now here he gains 8 yards. Like, oh no, here we go. 8 yards. Now it's 2nd and 2. I'm thinking they're going to Derrick Henry again. And here he's going to beat them down. This is the time where Derrick Henry takes over the game. They threw incomplete. On 3rd down, again, they stayed away from Derrick Henry and tried to pass, and Elliott makes a great play right. And then on 4th and 2, they stayed away from Henry again and punted from the Ravens 40-yard line. And I just thought it was a passive, bad decision
agreed.
by Vrabel. But you're right, Elliott is a tremendous hitter. And most of the time he stays within reason, and he's just got a great instinct for being physical. He's not a big guy, but he just gives everything to every hit. And yeah, other than the Andrews play, not the highlight, the Jackson touchdown and the big plays, but the Andrews play and the Deshaun Elliott hit were the 2 plays to me that they're never going to show up on like a highlights package, but they were 2 of the biggest plays of the game.
Sarah, as Gary alluded to, flipping sides and looking at the defense, knowing how unproductive the Bills' running game is, present me a way that Josh Allen can win this game. In other words, against this defense.
Attack the Ravens inside linebackers with the pass game. That is the Ravens' weakness on defense. And, I hate to single him out because Patrick Queen is going to be phenomenal. Okay. He started for less than a full season in college. It's his rookie season. He's clearly got raw skills that are going to be amazing. But at this point, as the Ravens head into the divisional round, he is not diagnosing the passing game yet. And I can't remember if it was the longest play, but it was one of the longest plays against the Bills is when Frickster came off and on the left side of the ball and came crossing right behind Patrick Queen. Patrick Queen lost him before he even identified him to begin with. Went right behind him, caught the ball. And then what was frustrating is that Queen didn't even go all out after he caught it to go get it. Like he let Humphrey and Peters do the dirty work and bring him down. And that was like one of the points in the game. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. Are the Titans like you thought, Bo? Like, is this where the Titans are going to come back? And so I would like to see, so obviously it's going to be a very different game plan, right? The Bills are not known for running the ball, and they just lost their rookie running back. They had to go out and sign. Yeah, they had to sign Devonta Freeman, to the practice squad this week. And so it is all about winning through the air. And so we might have some inactives that are different. I mean, they had to put in last week, they were trying to keep the D-line rotation fresh, and Wink is a master at that. He did a phenomenal job at keeping those guys fresh so that they could handle Henry in the 4th quarter. Well, now, do you now try to get more defensive backs on the field? Maybe Jaron Kearse. And to me, what Wink is going to have to do is, whether it's in a nickel package, a dime package, quarter, or whatever, maybe get one of those inside linebackers off the field, put in a safety, try to get like a dime linebacker in there. Because at this point, I mean, I could just see Cole Beasley going across the middle time and time and time
Like
again.
Edelman,
And so,
like Edelman.
like, yeah. And so these inside linebackers, they're really going to have to make their reads, do all that. And maybe you got to take them off every once in a while and put in a safety there instead.
So with the running game so limited for the Bills, does that allow Wink the opportunity to put more pressure on Allen? Does he have
the danger is
somebody?
Allen can run, right?
Yeah.
So you can put pressure on him, but you got to contain him too, because he can be a damaging runner in his own right. I do think they will have to get pressure on him in ways maybe like a guy like Ngakoue, I think might be a real big factor in this game. Chris Board is the inside linebacker, I think, is one to watch because he's a little quicker. And if you remember the Bengals game, he stayed with Gio Bernard right down the sideline on a long passing. They like him. They like his speed. I think with Patrick Queen, to get to Sarah's point, I think, and Wink said this back when they drafted him, he's really fast. He's going to make some mistakes from being too fast, and we can live with that because of the raw talent. And sometimes he overcommits. I was surprised, to Sarah's point, I was surprised Tennessee didn't go back more and more and more. I thought they got away from that, especially with Derrick Henry not getting what he wanted. I thought they were going to go more and more to the tight ends over the middle where the Ravens look vulnerable. They look vulnerable from the very first drive or second drive of the game.
So Knox and Beasley figure to be big parts of this offense.
I think the middle of the field is where the Ravens are susceptible in the passing game. I totally agree with Sarah on that. To your point about the rush, yeah, they've got to get to Allen, but they got to contain him, and they know that. And he's a big guy. Wink was talking today about they feels like he's a young Ben Roethlisberger in terms of his size and toughness to bring down. And the last thing you want is a guy like him extending the play, because then once a play looks like it might be over and it's extended, that's when a guy like Stephon Diggs suddenly pops free, or John Brown or whatever, and you get the cornerbacks are holding on for so long in coverage, and then Allen extends a play, a guy squirts loose, and you got 25 yards.
Gary, a couple more, and then we'll ask for predictions.
Well, guys, look, let me interject on the defense. I think something else you may see, Sarah and Bo and Stan, in the second half is, against Buffalo, is less blitzing. I know it may sound counterintuitive because the Ravens are one of the most blitz-heavy teams in the National Football League. But if you look at the stats from the game against Tennessee, they blitzed about 65% of the time in the first half, but only about 30% of the time in the second half. They dropped into coverage and they rushed with 4, and they got pressure. Pardon me. They got pressure on Tannehill with 4 because, remember, they had all their weapons back. They had Campbell, they had Ngakoue, they had Judon, they had Williams playing all together on the same field for the first time. Sarah, you may, or Bo, you may know this better than me, maybe for the first time all season, if I'm not mistaken. And so they got good pressure with just the 4 in the second half. I think if the Ravens can get pressure, not necessarily sack them, but just get pressure and keep Allen in the pocket and defend against his ability to extend plays from outside the pocket, they with the front 4, they can drop 7 in coverage, help those inside linebackers, and not have to worry about one-on-one coverage across the middle of the field. Sarah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's interesting because today somebody asked Wink Martindale about his reputation about being blitz happy. And he almost leaned into it, almost like, fine, just believe it, just like right. Expect that, And so I agree with you. I tweeted about this a while ago. So I know I don't know if it's never that they've never played together, but it's been extremely rare. Like if it's happened, it's been 1 or 2 at the most games where they've all been together. So this defensive roster that Eric DeCosta and everybody had in mind is only now finally coming together for the playoffs. And Yannick actually didn't get a ton of snaps because they were trying to seal those edges. Pernell McPhee played out of his mind. He was sealing the edge. They were all about trying to keep Henry contained. And so now it's like, well, now Yannick can now start getting more snaps. And then you're trying to get more pressure with that 4-man blitz rather than bringing the extra. Now you can just sprinkle it in as a surprise rather than it being the norm. But I will also say this. I think the best defense that the Ravens can play is keeping the time of possession. And I really think the Ravens can do that against this rush defense of the Bills. If Lamar and JK and Gus can just keep bleeding them and bleeding them and bleeding them, then there's not going to be any play action. Then, you can't fool those inside linebackers as much, trying to get them to bite. Just keep bleeding that clock so that they can't be out there. But I agree with you on the 4-man rush.
Gary, you got another one?
No, I think I'm good. I mean, I think we're ready for predictions, if I'm not mistaken, Stanley.
Let me just jump in and ask Bo this. I happen to notice you tweeted the injury report, and that both Judon and Marcus Peters have missed 2 practices in a row. Is there anything really there, or just wanting to keep them ready to go on Saturday?
I have to confess I wasn't there today because I had a thing with my daughter. So Judon's missed 2 days with what they call illness. I'm assuming.
I hate that illness.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone starts.
He's already had COVID. So
he has. Right.
Yes.
With Marcus Peters missing 2 days with his, I think they said it was his back. I would be surprised if Marcus Peters doesn't answer the bell here and go. I mean, John Harbaugh said on Monday, I think it was, that he didn't see any issues in terms of health that would be a problem. So I'm expecting Marcus Peters will be there.
All right. Before we do predictions, I just have to ask you, when training camp started, it's just interesting. You made the point about Earl Thomas. With Yonda having retired, and if you had said that Earl Thomas won't play a down and Ronnie Stanley will get hurt like in week 3 or 4 and miss the rest, you wouldn't have given the Ravens much of a chance to be where they are right now.
No, I give them a lot of credit for what they've done. And I've always said, I think John Harbaugh does a terrific job. And every year, every team is going to have something like that. But, the Earl Thomas thing is something you can't predict, right? Yeah. But when you talk to people, it was clear that was just this festering problem. And in the end, it turned out to be addition by subtraction. And John Harbaugh loves to talk about, when the I forget exactly the wording he uses, something like when the distraction ends up being more than the contribution, you get rid of the distraction. And that was clearly the case there. So, and Deshaun Elliott stepped in and did a good job. And let's face it, this offensive line has been a work in progress for much of the year since Stanley got hurt. Orlando Brown, who I thought wasn't playing great early in the year, and I thought he missed Marshall Yanda being right next to him. I thought he's played quite well at left tackle since taking over Stanley, and Bradley Bozeman's done really well. So a lot of people have had to contribute to get where they are with the people they've lost. They lost Nick Boyle too, who's a big part of this thing.
Yep.
So every team has those challenges, and I give them a lot of credit for kind of what they've been able to do.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing about Earl Thomas and not foreseeing that. I just want to put this out there because I've seen it a lot this week after Marcus Peters led the whole team onto the logo, right? And there's all the controversy on all of that. And then they asked John Harbaugh about it, and he talked he went on for a while saying how much he loves Peters, and he has to decide, for him, how far is too far or not. But as a coach, all he cares about is not getting penalties. Like that's the part he coaches. So from that, some people on Twitter were like, oh, be careful, Peters. John Harbaugh doesn't like personalities. And I just want to say that's an old, tired, and inaccurate narrative that is ridiculous. Okay. How many personalities does John Harbaugh have to coach for people to let go of that narrative? I mean, Bolden was no pushover. Steve Smith is no pushover. Ed Reed was no pushover, and they're still good friends. Ray Lewis wasn't one. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. That's distinction I want to put out there. John Harbaugh doesn't put up with open rebellion. That was Earl Thomas. That was Earl Thomas not showing up for meetings. That was him not reporting on time. That was the same with Bernard Pollard. Those. So he doesn't do well with rebellion. He's trying to coach a team here, but he's fine with personalities. I just wanted to attack that narrative once again, as we brought up Earl Thomas, and I thought it after Peters. Like, he's fine with Peters. He's good with Peters, just not open rebellion.
I think John also appreciated that it came from the players wanted really to get rid of Earl Thomas.
Exactly.
And that's how important that was. Let's start with you, Sarah. The game's going to be played. I guess it's going to be about 20 to 25 degrees Wind chill probably be in the teens. Might be a little sprinkle of rain or snow. What do you see? What do you think score-wise?
Yeah, well, I mean, I know these are two high-scoring offenses, but so is the Ravens and the Titans, so that's making me a little gun. Plus, we don't know if snow's going to be out there. There's like a 50% chance of that. So I'm going to give the Ravens a win, 28-21. I think that they're going to dominate the time of possession and be able to handle it with their run game.
Bo?
I'm going to take the Ravens 23-21. I agree with Sarah. I think the key for the Ravens, I think their defense will show up. They have when you look at the way they've invested their secondary, last year they built their defense to stop Derrick Henry last week. They've invested in their secondary for a challenge like this. And I think those players will be up to the task. And I think this is a game where they can shorten the game, limit the number of possessions. And if they're able to effectively run the ball, that works in their favor. And I think that will be huge.
Sarah, I'm writing it down. You were 28-21?
Correct.
28. Gary, what are you?
Well, before I get to my prediction, I want to make one quick point, if you'll allow me. On the offensive line, Bo made a good point about the offensive line. But, in my opinion, it's more than about the five guys in front. It's about Patrick Ricard. It's about Eric Tomlinson, who took over from Nick Boyle, who's done a tremendous job. The way the Ravens run the football, it's not only the front five. It's the fullback, it's the tight end, it's the receivers. Miles Boykin is a tremendous blocking receiver. It never shows up in the box score. Willie Snead, when he's in the lineup, great blocker, never shows up in the box score. So to me, the combined efforts of the run game is more than just the five guys on the offensive line. As far as the score is concerned, look, I know most playoff games are close. I think this one will be close for much of the game, but I think it's going to be not that close in the end. I'm taking the Ravens to keep the ball, like Sarah was saying, control the clock, time of possession, and do to Buffalo what Tennessee had done to the Ravens in the past, and that was win the game in the fourth quarter. I like the Ravens 30-17 over Buffalo. Buffalo's not quite ready yet.
I won't go as deep into the analysis, but I agree. It's 30-19 Baltimore Ravens. I think they pull away the second half. The only equalizer could be that playing field being incredibly wet, and that
we'll
might
see.
change.
I hope they wear the right shoes.
Yeah, I hope they will wear the right shoes.
Hey, Gary, really quickly, I think you also need to point out in the last couple of games, when you watch some of Lamar Jackson's runs, designed runs, the running backs have also been unbelievably good blockers. Yeah. Gus Edwards has made a couple of tremendous blocks. So all of that, you're right, all of that plays into the success of what they've done offensively on the ground.
Hey, guys, I really appreciate it. Incredible conversation. Sarah, we'll get back to you, okay? And Bo, we appreciate everything you do for PressBox. For Gary Stein, I'm Stan the Fan Charles. Want to remind you that PressBox Live is brought to you by C3 America Exteriors. Go to their website at c3america.com and get your roof damage repaired for just the cost of your deductible. Or go to c3america.com now to get a free roof inspection. That's C3 American Exteriors. Monday night, Ross Grimsley and I will have Orioles coach Freddie Gonzalez on to talk a little baseball. Let's keep our fingers crossed for a Ravens victory. I'm out of here. I'll see you all. Bye.
See you guys.